Hello and welcome to Theatre.Reviews with Paul Severn. I'm here at the National Theatre to see Infinite Life. Infinite Life by Annie Baker, which I saw at the National Theatre's Dorfman, is a play you might find riveting or soporific, or both. 5 women all have illnesses that are causing them chronic pain, but that conventional medicine's been unable to treat or sometimes even identify. Desperate for a cure, they have resorted to fasting in a retreat in California. They lie on sun loungers, they doze, they sip their water or green drinks, and they talk. There's no action, no emotional explosions, no one dies, and no dramatic plot twists. Although there is an interesting development at the end. Now, if this sounds like a snooze fest, it's not. Keep watching and I'll tell you why I was engrossed and why I think this is an outstanding play. But first, please like, comment and subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Infinite Life may remind you of Waiting for Godot and its days repeating into infinity. Like Beckett's play, there's not much drama, but a lot going on beneath the surface and quite a bit of humour. And for good measure, there's a doctor in charge of the clinic and possibly their fates who is mentioned frequently but never appears. Why is it called Infinite Life? Well, my take is that because the 5 women are so consumed by their pain that they live very much in the moment, unable to think of life beyond it. I understand that you may prefer loud over quiet, fast over slow, witty comedy over gentle humour, but personally, I love the way every sentence of Annie Baker's dialogue seemed carefully constructed to work on 2 levels and rewarded concentrated listening. So there's the surface of apparently inconsequential talk about what they're reading or their lists of diagnoses and failed treatments or their chat about sex. Then there are the implications of what they're saying in the context of pain and the hints of the lives they have led and will lead outside this moment of suspended time. Even Annie Baker's trademark pauses and silences as the women gather their thoughts or get lost in them reinforce the disorientation of fasting, as well as giving us, the audience, moments of contemplation. Okay, this play is about pain, but it's certainly not as depressing as you might imagine. Most of the time you admire these women's resilience rather than feel sorry for them. And they may not form any deep emotional connection with each other, but there are lessons to be drawn from the mutual respect inspired by their confinement together and their common predicament. Their conversations are leavened with some very funny lines, and I could have carried on listening to them chatting long beyond the 1 hour 45 minutes. If you're expecting their torment to be a metaphor for life, you'll be disappointed. It is what it says on the tin. As one of the characters says, if pain doesn't mean anything, it's so boring. But if it means anything at all, I don't know if I can bear it. It is what it brings out in their characters and how they gently support one another that stands out for me. Now, this is a joint National Theatre and Atlantic Theatre Company production, but the effort has been put in by the Americans. Their off-Broadway production has been transported, set, creatives and cast, thanks to an agreement between the British Actors Union and American Equity. And what a cast we were privileged to see at the National. Annie Baker has created 5 strong characters, and directed by James Macdonald, all the actors do a superlative job at suggesting their suffering, their vulnerability, their fortitude, and their inner life. Marylouise Burke is Eileen, the oldest, who shuffles slowly on and off stage, carefully laying out her cushions on her lounger, moving with delicate precision as if every movement hurts. Katigbak plays Yvette, precise and firm in her thoughts, and who reels off a tremendously long list of ailments, but also reveals her desperation for the fasting to be a cure. Brenda Pressley's Elaine, reserved and determined, and as Ginny, Kristine Nielsen has a twinkling eye and a playful manner. Christina Kirk plays Sophie, at 47 the youngest of the cohort. She is tortured and self-torturing, at times blaming herself for her illness. You might think that chronic pain would push sex off the agenda. Far from it. While the older women muse on sex, she is still racked by desire, a desire that has jeopardised her marriage, sex that is debilitatingly painful, and the wild belief that orgasms might be the cure. In the night, she leaves voice messages for her separated husband about her agony, and for her platonic lover about sex. Incidentally, this was the second National Theatre production running that I've seen, The House of Bernarda Alba being the first, in which a woman has masturbated on stage. I'm hoping this isn't now compulsory, because the next show I'm seeing at the National is The Witches. Sex crops up quite frequently as a subject for conversation in the play. Someone wonders if bad sex is the cause of illness. On another occasion, someone talks about how a cousin describes pornography for blind people. But like almost everything they say, what they talk about gives us hints as to their own situations. Sometime into the play, a solitary man appears. Acted well by Pete Simpson, Nielsen is mature and attractive enough to make the women take notice. His character is much more thinly drawn than those of the women. Unlike them, he has a specifically identified and, it would seem, mortal disease. He seems to be there mainly for two reasons, and I'll come to the other one later, but the first is to provide a contrast to the women's camaraderie. "I don't want to sound like a dick," he says, and then proceeds to do just that. He is the only character who contends to others that his agony is worse than theirs. Sophie says to him, "You don't actually know if your level of pain that night was worse than my level of pain on my worst night. It's impossible to know." Until then, I hadn't fully taken on board how, for the women, their suffering is not a competition. They realise that, like sex, everyone has their own unique, incomparable experience of suffering. And as an audience, we cannot make a judgment. They and we can only offer gentle sympathy. Privately, it may be different. Eileen, who seems the calmest of all, has a disjointed moment alone on stage when she says, "This is the night you heard me screaming. I said terrible things. I said none of you have ever been in this much pain. I said it's a conspiracy. I said a minute of this is an infinity." Not something any of them would actually say out loud to one another. They keep their all-engulfing agony to themselves. When they're not talking about sex or illness, the women often talk philosophically about what they've read. And again, we can see how what interests them reflects on their own lives. Most significantly, Sophie is trying to read George Eliot's novel Daniel Deronda. I don't believe this is a random choice by Annie Baker. When asked what it's about, Sophie says that so far the book is concerned with Gwendolen and her suitors. Those familiar with the novel will know that Gwendolen is somewhat self-obsessed, contained in her own world, as people in constant agony are. Sophie says, "If I'm not reading it all the time, it seems really boring. But once I'm into it, it's like the most entertaining thing in the world." Is Annie Baker giving a knowing wink to the audience about this play? Sophie is finding it hard to get beyond page 152. The sentence she gets stuck at says, "Irrational fear can stop you doing what you know is achievable." Something else to think about, and certainly relevant to the test Nielsen provides for Sophie on whether she will act on her sexual desire. Dusk follows day, night takes over, then another day in the blazing California sun begins. Lighting designer Isabella Byrd dims the lights into moonlight that actually feels cool, then slams on a sudden migraine-inducing flood of light. The women's current lives may be an infinite loop as each day merges into the next, but there is a finite time frame to the play. It begins on the first day of Sophie's stay at the retreat and ends on the day she leaves. The set from the New York design collective Dots suggests the monotony of fasting. It's minimal and never changing. In front of a beige background, there's a patterned breeze block wall of a similar colour, about 2 metres tall, and in front of that, there are a number of sun loungers. The cheap nature of the wall and the beds implies that the so-called clinic is a New Age sham designed to make money from desperate people who've been failed by medical science. For the majority of the play, the women sit on their loungers as if they are islands in an ocean of agony. They talk, but they don't make physical contact or delve deeply into each other's lives. But then, as we reach the final minutes of the play, there is a moment between Sophie and Eileen which does seem to take us forward. They touch each other, both mentally and physically. It's a human connection that suggests we need not be alone in our pain. This seems to point to a way in which we can possibly learn from it, perhaps by moving from the inward-facing world of Gwendolen to the outward-looking and more empathetic behaviour of Daniel Deronda himself. I love it that Annie Baker can create such a funny, moving play about being human without resorting to easy messages and emotional manipulation. I give Infinite Life 4 stars. I hope you found this review interesting, and if you did, why not subscribe to this channel and you'll be the first to know about my future reviews. You can also read my reviews at Theatre.Reviews, and you can follow me on Threads, Mastodon, X, Instagram and Facebook. Thank you for watching.